When you're looking at car insurance and home insurance, you're thinking of two major companies. Two of the largest insurance companies you're going to come across is going to be State Farm and Progressive. And today we're going to compare the two companies head to head and see which one's the better fit. Whether it's customer reviews, whether it's claim handling, whether it's just price, whichever one's the best fit for what you're looking for. Let's dive in and explain. Now, the first piece you have to think about is what coverages are we comparing? Because I can tell you the low coverages versus high coverages and one's gonna look better. But when we average it out, most companies, if you look at reviews online, if you look at different comparison websites, all of the things that we're gonna talk about, the coverage is $100,000 per person, $300,000 per accident. That's if you were to injure somebody. Most of the cars we're gonna compare are gonna have comprehensive and collision, which is what everybody calls full coverage. Technically a made-up word, but it exists. We say it in our world. And so you're going to have a $500 deductible. Now, the states that you have medical or personal injury protection, we're just going to show the $5,000 med pay. That's a common. It's still not enough. If you're shopping for insurance, you probably should ask for a little bit more if the agent is discussing that with you. But in general, for comparison purposes, those are the liability limits, the comp and collision, and the medical coverages that we're talking about. Yes, this is assuming if you're going to have comp and collision, you're going to also want rental car coverage. Most of them are going to be $50 a day up to $1,500, so that'll pay for your rental car. And then road service and towing is included if available. So let's just dive into the prices. If you're comparing strictly price, keep in mind each state has different rates. Michigan's a lot higher than, well, Florida is also high, but Michigan's a lot higher than a Virginia or Ohio or Texas. Those states are going to be half as much as a Michigan would be. But if you're looking in general across the US, Progressive is going to be the cheaper options in most cases. According to Bankrate, their sampling size, they said Progressive's average full coverage was about $2,214 per year. It's pretty decent. State Farm's was an average of $2,711 per year. And then if you go to the minimums, you're looking at about $742 per year with Progressive versus $918 per year. So in the general wide view of everything, Progressive is going to be a lot less expensive. But keep in mind, there are some issues that Progressive has that State Farm doesn't have. And we'll dive into those in just a moment. The bigger piece is when you're looking at what I call a profile. Your driving profile is made up of who you are, your insurance score, which includes credit, your number of claims you've had, the area that you live in plays a large factor because if there's a lot of riskier drivers, a lot of thefts, that's going to increase your rate. Or if you're in a really good area, that's going to decrease your rate. Are you willing to take certain telematics tests and things like that? That will determine your profile. The biggest piece that you're going to find, age plays a huge factor. In the age of 25 is the common when you start to see those prices start to creep back down. When we compare the two, Progressive also was a lot less expensive. They're about $2,720 per year versus State Farm, which is $3,171 per year. When you get older, that's when it starts to creep back up. When you're 50, everything's great. Everybody wants your business. You've got everything working. You got your job, your house, all the things are happening, hopefully, and you start to age. When you get close to that 70 mark, you're going to find that the rates are going to skyrocket again. So you're going to be not as much as a teenager. So your 16-year-old's always going to be paying more, and then up to the 25 and it'll go down. When you hit 70, you're going to see that Progressive's about $2,089 per year versus State Farm, which is $2,557 per year. If you have what's called a good driver discount credit, that's if you are a young driver, you're under 25, typically you're on your parents' policy, you can do what's called a good driver test or good driving course, and that will help. If you're older, you can do the same thing with a mature driver course. So those are extra pieces, but Progressive usually drops the price down about $2,214 versus State Farm's $2,711 per year for those options. Now that's if you have good credit. If you don't have good credit, you can pretty much add $1,000 to that bill. It's about $3,832 for Progressive. State Farm is over $10,000 based on some of these sample sizes that we've seen. That shows you how big that profile, that insurance / credit is going to play a factor. When you have a really good insurance score, that's all of those things. And I'll link a video that goes over what actually is entailed in a credit score or insurance score, because it's not just credit, but all of those things add up to give you those benefits. So it does matter having that extra credit and that extra insurance score to improve upon with the age that you're at. Now, the bigger piece is how well are you serviced at that level? Because if I'm saving $500 a year, is there any way that you're servicing me at a lower level risk? Let's dive in and go over the levels of service. These are ranked by J.D. Power on the 1,000 mark. So every 1,000 points, they rank insurance companies on who has a better claims and a better retention in that department. By the way, if you are shopping for car insurance or home insurance, I'll put a link in the description below where if you are comparing companies, Progressive, Nationwide, Allstate, Geico, Travelers, a lot of those main companies that you would want to compare rates for, those all can be done through an independent agent. They can take your data, plug in your presets, and then they can shop that across multiple companies at once, so you don't have to do all that extra legwork. If you're going to State Farm, you have to call an individual State Farm agent, and that's another option that you have as well. But looking at the service, the reason you would lean towards State Farm is because they do actually have a little bit better customer service than Progressive, according to J.D. Power. The satisfaction score for Progressive was 672, which honestly isn't too bad. When you're looking at State Farm, it's 710. The key takeaway for that is that the claim satisfaction has been better with State Farm, a little bit more than Progressive. And I'll be honest with you, I disagree with those numbers for a couple reasons. With the home, yes, if you're looking at homeowners insurance, I think Progressive is lacking as far as their strictness. They're very tight to what they say is covered, and they stick to that. State Farm, on the other hand, is in the news all the time for not paying claims quick enough and having some issues, especially with some of the wildfires happening right now or that have happened in the past. They have a lot of lawsuits happening because of that. So at the end of the process, your average customer in a non-high-risk state is not going to have that overload. When it comes to car insurance, the reason Progressive is more of an issue is because it's the agent that is doing that work. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes those independent agents are looking to make the quickest sale. They're trying to find the cheapest company because that's what they were trained. The biggest piece is that they need to start talking about coverage and conversation. What is something that you're looking for, or what is important to you is what your agent should be asking. If they're not, honestly, I probably wouldn't even lean towards them. I'd try to find another independent agent that I could work with that wants to care about my scenario. Should I have this much coverage? If the agent's willing to say, hey, you have too much coverage here, you don't have enough, that's a conversation I want to have. That's one of the things that a lot of the State Farm agents have started with, but I'll be honest with you, there are some similarities to where at the end of the day, they only have one product, so they have to be competitive, and if they're not, it's pulling off coverage. Maybe it's having those conversations. And if they can do that profitably and give you the right coverages that still fit your needs, 100%, that's a great way to go. That's where those independent agents tend to shine a little bit more, is because they have all those other companies that they compare against. Those are your options that you're looking at when you're comparing these two companies. It's not just the J.D. Power. They're, yes, a paid service. So technically, people feel like that can be leaned one way or another. Obviously, if State Farm gave them $10 million, I would be inclined to give them a good review. I don't know. State Farm, are you going to give me $10 million? I'll take it. We got the best review ever. And the customer reviews is the next step that actually outshines that J.D. Power option, because it's now actually what are customers saying. Now, this was done with a couple different sources. We used Bankrate with their customer reviews that they've pulled. We've used NAIC. That's a complaint index where customers can go to complain, like in the government or legally. And then there's also what's called consumer review. That is commonly a negative one, because most consumers go to review like snapshots and stuff like that where they're complaining against it. So with those comparison sites, Bankrate probably has a better ranking system in my opinion, but they had a 4.4 out of 5 for Progressive. They had a 4.3 out of 5 for State Farm. So it's pretty negligible. I think both companies shined there. If you go to the NAIC, the complaint website, you're looking at a 0.98, and that's actually really, really good. That's with Progressive, and you're looking at a 1.21, which is actually a little bit worse for State Farm. The higher the number, the more complaints or percentages of complaints that you're going to see. In this case, Progressive outshines State Farm, although overall the whole scenario, we've seen that State Farm has a little bit better of the customer service level. I think that has to do with the largeness or the size of the service department. We're starting to see that starting to get better and better as we've come out of what we call a lull or a hard market for insurance, to where all the rates were going up. There wasn't enough service people. There was not enough people to fix the cars, and it was just a bad experience for most everybody. Okay, great, but which company is the best fit for me? Because they're very close in comparisons. There's a little bit better pricing, but do I go with this one over the other? To really showcase what Progressive does a little bit outside of what State Farm does, is they're going to be better on pricing. They have the lower rates. They have more of a high risk ability. If you get a ticket, if you've had an accident, if you've had a lapse in insurance, they're commonly going to be your go-to because of pricing. It tends to get astronomical on the other side of any major company, not just State Farm, but also it tends to be a little bit to the point where they almost lock you out and you can't join them at some point. So there's some of those restrictions that you don't have a choice either way. The digital tools and customizations, I think both of them are probably going to be good, but Progressive has been known for being tech friendly. They are really into forward thinking on technology. So that's one of the bigger pieces that Progressive outshines almost every company in general. State Farm is going to be a little bit better for that claim satisfaction. And that to me is a very important piece, because when you do have claims, especially on the home, if you trust the agent, if you've gone through the process, you have full replacement costs on the roof, not an actual cash value, a scheduled roof, make sure that you have the right coverage. If that's the case, according to these comparisons, State Farm is going to be a little bit better in the scenarios that you have with actual claims. Now, that agent experience is something you're going to have to determine if you like the determination of going with a State Farm agent versus going with an independent agent. I'd love to hear your comments if you've had a good or bad experience on either. And again, if you are looking for a new agent, I'll put a link in the description below. Now, what good review video would this be if we didn't talk about their specific individual coverages that they do that the other one doesn't? One of the things that we've seen with Progressive is they've really gotten into those extra coverages, which is something like gap insurance. They call it a savings bank or a loan payoff as well. And that's something that they've been doing a really good limit of. They go up to 25% of the value, depending on each state. Obviously, each state does different rules. You'll have to talk to your agent to verify that, but that's called their deductible savings bank. That basically you also can drop your deductible by about $50 per period. Since Progressive does every 6 months period on average, you're likely going to save $50 for the first 6 months, $50 for the next 6 months. So if you do have a claim a couple years later, if that happens, which could just happen, then you might not have any deductible by having that actual savings bank. Now, the research does talk about their levels. They actually have levels that you can achieve, and there's the diamond, and there's the gold, and there's an emerald, which means you've been with them for 14, 15 plus years. And they start to give you accident forgiveness. They give you vanishing deductible, all of these benefits just because you've stayed with them. They're just key pieces. I honestly think that it doesn't necessarily play a factor in the price you pay. So if the price gets out of hand, you're going to leave that anyways. So if that's the case, then you're not going to fall in love with that part of it. But if you do have a claim and it's your fault and you've been with them for 5 years and they've given you that extra emerald status or whatever the status is at the time, then that is just an extra benefit that most companies just don't give at all. The strength for State Farm is they have the Drive Safe and Save. Both of them have a telematics software where you can show that you're a good driver. And if you know you're a good driver, it's either way, it's fine with either which one. The issue that you have with Progressives versus State Farms is Progressives can cost you more, where State Farm, you get a 10% discount in most states. And if you don't do well, you just lose the 10% discount. So there was nothing gained, nothing lost. Where with Progressives, if you don't do good, they charge you more. It's a higher risk driver, so that's the case. So if you have 5 drivers and 3 of them don't do well, that's not great. Here with State Farm, you just don't have to worry about it. Now I need your help with one question, because State Farm actually listed online where I could find it, said they didn't offer gap insurance. That's not a deal breaker in my world at all, but I think that's a coverage that they'd be missing. Let me know if you found that your state allowed gap insurance with State Farm, if that's the case and you're with them. If not, I'd fail to say that it doesn't, because I feel like they should. And I'm not 100% sure that's a correct fact, but that's what the data is telling me. The bigger piece is the claims that you're going to see from customers. Let's talk about the biggest complaints from either. Progressive's bigger complaints is kind of what I just mentioned from State Farm, is the claims adjuster, connecting with them, communication, and actually being able to get a hold of the claims adjuster. The lack of communication, which is partially why their score is a little bit lower than State Farm's, is an issue. The other piece that we see on complaint websites is that their billings, their fees, and the renewal increases are a little bit of a shock. I don't fully see that. We're in 12 different states and we've had increases, but honestly, I've seen some companies go up 30% over the last 5 years. I've seen Progressive go up 20 in one state, but on average, you probably should be around 3 to 5% increase or decrease on what you would typically expect. For State Farm, it's more of their pricing model, and it just shows who's a fit and who's not a fit. They're a little bit more price sensitive. Obviously, we've seen that the prices are a little bit higher, but that profile, if you have bad credit, especially if you have a big spread, then you're gonna see that the rates aren't even gonna be competitive. So that's the biggest complaint with State Farm, and they have fewer add-ons. Like we mentioned, they said no gap insurance. The 24/7 customer service is, tell me about that one, because I didn't find any full data to back that one up, but in general, they said there's not a 24/7 customer service, at least for general type of customers, and there's no way. That seems impossible. If that's the case, tell me below if you weren't able to get a hold of their customer service, because I can't imagine any insurance company, especially the larger ones, not having a 24/7 claim service. There is a higher complaint index with State Farm. So when you go to that NAIC website, that 1.21, you're going to see more people complaining. You also got to see that there's more customers over there. Because State Farm is the larger company of the two, they're naturally going to have more complaints. So keep that in mind when you are researching the companies and debating which one's the best fit. You've got those two main options. So there you have it. If you're looking at price, straight to Progressive. If you want to give them a shot, State Farm can be competitive in some states. If you're looking for a gap and you want to cover your car loan in case something major happens, you're going to go there. If you're really into the digital piece, you're going to go there. If you're looking for a little bit better claim satisfaction, you've got State Farm, and you have that local agent. Again, those independent agents should be local that have Progressive, but you've got to find the right one that's the right fit. If you're looking to find out more about State Farm specifically, I actually did a review on State Farm in general. They've got a video here that's going to go further in depth. I did also do a review on Progressive a little while back. If you want to read that here, here's the review that we gave Progressive. Hopefully this was helpful. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I'm Mark with Think Insurance. I'll see you in the next one.